Okay, so I'll discuss just really quickly, just very basic details about my transition from being like a Democrat to a Republican, being left wing to right wing, being like anti-white to pro-white, and and all that. So basically, this is what happened was I'll just kind of get my thought process when I was a left winger. Like I saw myself as Jewish and I saw Jews as more black. So like just one example was I remember one time somebody posted a video of or posted something online about, it was a video on Edward Witten, and Edward Witten was a Jewish scientist who discovered M theory, right? And I really liked him, right? And he had kind of an afro, and I really looked up highly upon like afros, right? Because I was like, yeah, Jews are more black, and black is better, and I was a leftist, so like black is good and white people are bad, white people are colonizers and they're evil, and all that. So I remember someone in the comments was like, dude, this guy Edward Witten's not smart. He's just like an N-word. Like he's just an N-word. And I remember, but I was like, yeah, well, Jews are more black, and I really looked highly upon Edward Witten, and I looked highly upon like Einstein. Like Einstein kind of had like the crazy hair, and I wanted to kind of be black, and I saw Jews as more black. And like I remember seeing online some people, some like white supremacist type of people commenting like, Einstein's science was false, and kind of like what Hitler talked about, right? And it's Jewish science and stuff like that. And I was a leftist, and I'm like, yeah, evil white people, and no, I was a proponent of race mixing. So I was like, I thought that the Jews were so smart because they were like mixed race, and they had a little bit of black in them, and I thought that was superior. And I thought that maybe even black, like Einstein said something like, that black people are not the problem, but white people are the problem, or something like that. And I wanted to see it that way, and I thought that race mixing was good. And I thought Einstein was so smart because he was race mixed a little bit, and that he has superior genetics because I was of the opinion like there's a theory that when you mix races, when you mix genetics, you get a stronger outcome, you get a higher progeny, like a more superior progeny. And I remember one of my teachers kind of discussed that theory when I was in middle school. And that was kind of the way that I wanted to see it. Because, I was for race mixing because I was kind of anti-white. I was kind of anti-Aryan. And I wanted to defeat them because I think I saw myself as Jewish, and I saw Jews as more black. And so I wanted race mixing. I wanted to defeat the white people, especially the Aryans. Not all white people I saw as equally bad, because like if it was a white person who had kind of like Slavic features, I liked them better. I was kind of a communist. I was like the exact opposite of Hitler, right? Hitler didn't like the Slavs because he was like, they're white, but they're not the Aryan race, they're not the highest race. But I liked, the more ethnic you were, the more exotic you were, the more I liked you, and and I wanted to see myself that way. I wanted to see myself as not white, because I don't know because I think I saw myself as Jewish, and also maybe the brainwashing of my culture made me see white people as bad. But like I said, in college, I started recognizing after I lost the swag flow that white people had more swag flow and stuff. And I started feeling bad. And I was like, maybe this whole anti-white agenda is kind of not good, But regardless, this was the way that I saw things, right? And like I said, it was later, like my senior year of college, when I watched a video that said that, like everybody outside of Africa, based off the scientific theories, we don't know if these are true, right? There's other theories. Like the religious people say, no, the white people came from Japheth, and the black people came from Cain, and the Jews came from Seth and stuff like that, right? Based off Noah's Ark and everything. But at this point, I was anti-religion. I thought religion was racist. I thought, religion was white supremacist, right? So I was more of a follower of the scientific materialistic motive, viewing things. So the example would be like, yeah, so I watched this video on the genetics of, the first people were the black people, right? And I wanted to believe that, right? Oh yeah, that's why they're superior, because they were the first people, and that's why, because I wanted race mixing and I was anti-white, and so I want to be like, yeah, that's why they're the strongest, that's why they're the best, because they're from Africa, and Jews are a little bit mixture of Africans, and that's why Jews are so awesome too, and I was like that, and that's why that there's racism against Africans, because everybody outside of Africa comes from just one group that left Africa, so they're all inbred. So that's why I wanted to see it. So I always wanted to look at the black or the darker as better. Like the darker is best, right? And the lighter is worst. Because I wanted race mixing. Because I think that I was anti-white, anti-Aryan. Because I saw myself as Jewish, right? So I really like, I held on to that belief system. Like, oh yeah, well, everybody outside of Africa came from one family and they're all inbred. So I wanted to kind of like put down everybody outside of Africa. And I wanted to say like, oh, and that's why the black people were persecuted. So when I was a leftist, I was always against victim blaming and always for, against blaming. I was against blaming the victim. And, when I became a right winger, I became more for blaming the victim. And I'll get into that more. But I remember I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish and I thought like, Jews were always victims, but I wanted to see the victims as the good guy. And I hated the idea that people would be like blaming the victim. I thought that was a religious thing where people would be like, yeah, God is just. And so God, his punishments are just. And so, the Jews were punished because of their sins, and, black people were probably punished because of their sins. And like I said, I went to like black religious church meetings, and the black people would kind of say that like, yeah, the reason why we were enslaved was because we were worshiping idols and stuff. And I hated that. I was like, why are you guys blaming yourself? Like, have some pride and go against religion, because no, don't blame yourself. And because it makes you guys look bad and makes the white man look good for what he did. Right. And I was anti-white. I wanted race mixing. Right. So I was always like, I wanted to like, to not blame black people for anything or people of color for anything. So like when I heard that there's more crime among blacks, I thought, well, yeah, because of the white people, and also because there's more genetic diversity among blacks because they came from Africa, and there's more genetic diversity in Africa because only one family left Africa and everybody outside Africa is inbred. So I wanted to put down the people outside Africa, and even the fact that Africans, committed more crimes and stuff, right? I want to be like, well, yeah, because more genetic diversity. It's like a way to put them down, but at the same time, like lift them up, like, yeah, because they're more genetically diverse, and they can't help that. Because again, I wanted to be a proponent of Darwinism, because I was against religion, and I thought that everything was based around Darwinism, right? So I'd be like, yeah, there's more crime in the black community, and that's probably why black people are more violent among each other, even because there's more genetic diversity among them, and it's like a subconscious. People can gauge subconsciously their genetic diversity and genetic distinction, and that's why they fight each other more. So, but at the same time, I wanted to be like, but yeah, and so the only thing that can stop all the problems in the world is everybody mixed. And, and I thought that like, yeah. And so I wanted to be like, yeah. And so white people, you'd actually be better if you mix with black people, because then you'd get more genetic diversity, because genetic diversity is very good. And then that increases your strength and your genes, and it makes you even more superior, kind of like Jews are kind of mixed. And that's why Jews are superior. And that's my thought process. I was a leftist and I wanted race mixing, right? So that's really the way that I saw things. And I wanted to think that like, the black people were like, I loved the black rappers, like I forget the names of the groups, but just like, like Public Enemy, but the groups that were like Afrocentric and like we're the original black men, we're the Egyptians, we're the original man, we're gods on earth. I liked all that stuff, right? And and I thought that, yeah, black people and people of color were superior. And because again, like, I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish, and Jews are always victims, and black people are also victims. And I want to be like, well, actually, the victims are the best. The victims are the good guys. Jesus says the least are the greatest. The meek shall inherit the earth. That was the way that I wanted to see things. I interpolated things because my ego. I saw myself as Jewish, and so I wanted to make, I wanted to be against that whole victim blaming stuff and make the victims the good guys, make the victims the best, right? So, the black people will be like, yeah, the white man came from the caves and then they persecuted us. And I want to be like, yeah, because the black man's so high and so awesome, and that's why the white man persecuted him, because the white man's not natural. The white man's just, came from the caves. He's inbred and stuff, and is jealousy, and that's why the black man's persecuted. And I wanted to be like that, right? So ironically, that's why a lot of white people hate Jews, right? Because they think, yeah, Jews are anti-white and they want race mixing and stuff. And I didn't even and that's the way that I was. And so, and I don't like white people. I'm like, well, white people hate Jews, and I hated that white people hated Jews, but I'm like, but I was exactly the epitome of what they hated, right? So that's what I can acknowledge now, and I can recognize that now. Like, another example was I hated David Icke, because I was like, dude, David Icke is just a white supremacist, because I thought that he was against Israel and he was against like the Rothschilds and the bankers. I thought that was just, or the elites and stuff, right? And I thought that he was just like, oh, that's just really code word for Jews. And I was like, yeah, the reptilian thing, that's just code word for Jews. And he, and I remember like after watching one of David Icke's things, this is when I was on Kauai, he was like dancing to an Irish gig. And I was like, dude, this guy's just a white supremacist, dude. And he just doesn't like people of color. And he's just like he just wants, the white people to be maintained, and the way he's doing that, he's putting down the Jews because the Jews are for race mixing and stuff like that. And he can, so like I hated him, and I was like, this guy's evil. And I was like, this guy's racist. I was like, this guy's a freaking racist. He doesn't like Jews. He doesn't like black people. He doesn't like people of color. He wants to maintain the white people, right? But what's so ironic is that's the way that I thought. And even I wrote on YouTube, like, David Icke is a racist or something like that, or like David Icke is a white supremacist or something like that. But the thing is, like, now I can realize, like, dude, I was also racist, though. I was racist against white people. Like, yeah, he might have been racist against people of color, but people of color can also be racist against white people. And that's the way that I was. So, and I saw myself as a person of color, right? So, and like I said, I wanted to view the Bible as communist, and Jesus was really a communist, or really Jesus didn't really exist is what I wanted to believe. But so I wanted to always like undermine religion and make it seem ridiculous. But at the same time, I want to be like, but if he did exist, he was a communist, and because communism's good, because I was anti-white. I wanted the borders to go down. I wanted the white people to mix. I wanted to, because I think I saw myself as Jewish, and I wanted to beat the Aryans, right? So like, this is my ego. My ego was shaping the way that I operated, the way that I saw things. But then, like I said, when I turned from being a leftist to more right-winger, this was in 2014. Like, my whole life I was a leftist. My whole life I saw myself as black. I saw myself as black. I was like, I saw myself as a person of color. I looked down upon white people. I wanted white people to mix. I was like, that's what I was, the way I was, right? But then when I became like a right-winger for the first time in 2014, around that time, like 2013, 2014, that was when I went from being like, I hate victim blamers, because and again, like, another reason why I think I hated victim blamers is because I saw it with my family. Like, I saw it with my grandpa, with me, with the shoot away machine, and they wanted to blame me, and they wouldn't listen to me, and I'm going to get more into details about that, but like all this stuff, right? But I would switch from being a leftist to be more right wing, and being like, well, and I became kind of a victim blamer. So just like an example of the way that would manifest is, like, one example would be like the Native Americans, right? Quote unquote Native Americans. I wouldn't call them Native Americans, because I was like, at first when I was a leftist, I'd be like, yeah, they're the Native Americans. They're they were the original Americans, and the evil white people, because they're, inbred, and another thing that I noticed that I tried to like expound in some of my videos that I made was like, I wanted to be like, yeah, well, also the reason why Native Americans are sometimes racist against black people too is because they're also inbred, right? Like, the more dark you were, the more I liked you, right? And Native Americans were dark, but not super dark. So I liked them, but not as much as the darker. That's the way I was when I was leftist. But it was like, I was like, yeah, they're inbred too. So that's why they're sometimes racist against black people and stuff. And that's why they're also not as athletic and, stuff like that. But the black man is the supreme and everything. That's the way I wanted to see things, right? And I want to see Jews as like mixed with more black. And that's why, Jews were also supreme, right? But that's because I was a leftist. But then, when, like, just an example was, before I was like, yeah, Native Americans were the good guys, and they're more natural, and they're more one with nature. And, the white guys were the unnatural, they're agriculturalists and inbred, and they came and they wiped them out because they're, evil. And I was a leftist, typical leftist, anti-white, right? But then when I started becoming more religious, I'm like, no, I became more of a victim blamer. So before, I hated people who blame the victim, right? I hated the fact that religious people be like, yeah, the reason why we defeated the Native Americans was because, they're pagans, and, they were also, they're sacrificing, the Aztecs were sacrificing people, and they're not innocent victims, and they had empires, and they were also fighting. We were just better at it than them. And I hated that. But then when I became a right winger, I started adopting that mentality and becoming the victim blamer. So I was like, yeah, the Native Americans, yeah, they were basically satanic. They were doing the Aztec, cutting each other's hearts out. They were constantly at war. We just called them Native Americans. They weren't even Native Americans. They were actually, I called them Amerindians, and that actually is a term that a lot of scholars do use, because it is debatable if they are Native. But was like, yeah, no, the Amerindians, they come from, they're not really necessarily native to America, because there's the Solutrean hypothesis, which says that actually Europeans were the first people in America, and the Amerindians came and they killed them. So I wanted to make the Amerindians into the bad guys and blame the victim, be like, so when the Europeans came, we were just getting back at them, right? So I started becoming anti-white to becoming pro-white, right? And again, I started seeing myself as a little bit more white, and and also I started just feeling bad for white people. But at the same time, like, I still did kind of see myself as not completely white, but I started feeling bad for white people and seeing myself more as white. But basically my point is, I went from being a leftist, anti-white, to right-winger, pro-white. So, then you blame them. No, the Amerindians, they're not innocent victims. And that was something my grandpa always taught me, like, there is no innocent victim. And I always thought he was a white supremacist. I'd be like, okay, that's a white supremacist thing to say. Blame the victim. Blame the victim. Yeah, typical white supremacist. That's the way I saw my grandpa. But then I started to, and I do acknowledge, it is true. Now I know, and at the time I didn't understand the flow. And my grandpa would say, if you're in the flow, you can discern the truth. And it is true that sometimes a victim is not innocent. And there's complexities involved. And, just one example would be, and I don't want to be like, oh, I don't want people to go, oh, you blame women for being raped. But there is cases where, according to Jung, women will go out dressed in a immodest way and want a man to rape them. There's been cases of that. And there's been a case of, because it's exciting for them, and there's fantasies. Some of these women have fantasies of that. And Jung just described that. And again, before, I thought that Jung was a white supremacist and a victim blamer, right? That's the way I originally thought. And I didn't like anybody who was religious. And I saw Jung as kind of religious and kind of white supremacist a little bit. But my point is, though, like, if you really look deeply into things and try to discern things, a victim is not always innocent. There's complexities involved. And sometimes the victim was asking for it, or there were things are not always so cut and dry that when I was a leftist, I wanted to always make the victim the good guy. The women were the women were the good guys. The darker races are always the good guys. I always wanted to, but really I was, because I wanted to make the white people the bad guys. I wanted to race mix the Aryans and make, but when I became a right winger, I started to question that, and I started to switch, and I was like, no, the victims are to blame. So, like, just one other example of that would be like, and I noticed this, I didn't notice at the time, but I started studying this later. Like, some people say, like, in South Africa, the South African black people are not native to that region. The white people made it livable, then they made it inhabitable, and then the black people moved in there and they said, hey, we're native here. But then the white people are like, you're not necessarily native here. We made it habitable, and now you're living there, and because you're black, you can say that this is your land, but not really. We're the ones who made it livable. So we're as native to here as you are. And so, that would, when I became a right winger, that would be a position that I would want to adopt more, right? Because it was more pro-white and more blaming the victim. Like, no, you guys are not the good guys. You guys aren't the innocent, victims that you try to make yourself out to be. And the white people aren't the evil monsters that you try to make them out to be, right? And then, like, just other examples would be, like, at that time, I became very pro-religious. So I wanted to see the white people as either lost tribes of Israel or as descendants of Esau, who are more related to the Jews, or, and I would want to look at the parts of the Bible that say, don't marry into other tribes. Like, the tribe of Dan should marry within the tribe of Dan, and the Simeon marry within the tribe of Simeon, and, all that type of stuff. So I wanted to, I was more pro-white. And I liked religion because, religion, I felt, it maintains the order, maintains the status quo, and it's for helps white people, right? So then one other example was, I'll get to this more later, but like one other thing would be, an example would be like, I hated Minister Farrakhan when I was a leftist, because he was like, I thought this dude's just a Nazi, because he likes the same thing Nazis do. He doesn't want white people and black people to mix, and I wanted white people and black people to mix because I wanted to destroy white people, right? When I was a leftist. But I didn't say that, like, I would just say, like, no, that's mean, that's Nazi, like, he's basically a Nazi. And one way that I looked at it was, I saw that Farrakhan looked kind of white. Like, he looked black, but he also had kind of white features. And I thought, well, maybe he's like a secret white supremacist. and he just wants to maintain the white race because he knows that he has white genetics. Like maybe his white genes are like controlling him. That's what I wanted to think. And because I like leftist stuff, I like liberal stuff, and I liked race mixing. And Farrakhan was against like female promiscuity, and I thought, oh, those people are just Nazis who are against female promiscuity because they just want to make women into baby makers to maintain the white race and stuff like that, right? That's the way that I saw it. And so Farrakhan's against this, and Farrakhan to me just seemed like a regular Nazi. So I'm like, this guy's just a secret white supremacist, maybe, right? But because I thought, for the black people to beat the white people, he's doing exactly what the white people want so that they could maintain their power. I'm like, you want to beat them, you got to race mix with them, you got to dissolve the borders, you got to do all that. But so I didn't like Farrakhan. I thought he was just a white supremacist. But then, then I start to realize, like, then when I become a right winger, I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe it is best, like what Farrakhan says, that we do not intermix, and maybe it is best that women are not promiscuous, and I just became a typical right winger. So I'm gonna continue more.